I always sing when we go. Okay, so here we are. Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're
Hello.
here. I'm sweating, and I think Christina's sweating because it's a little warm. Hello, everybody. As you are starting to join, we are so excited that you're here for our reseller chat, our vintage reseller chat. Very excited. I've asked a few of these amazing ladies to join me today. These are women that I respect, that I enjoy following. They are very positive, great leaders in the community, and I was really excited that they all said yes. So we're going to be chatting all things vintage. We're really going to focus on the modeling piece. I know some of you actually sent in some questions that were more around identifying vintage pieces. And we may not get into that aspect because of time constraints, but we'll certainly see what we can answer as we go through. So as you are here, make sure that you put any questions in the chat, and we are going to dive right in. So to get us started, we are just going to do some introductions. These ladies, I feel, don't need introductions, but of course, it's always great to let new people know who you are. So we're going to start with name, the platforms that they sell on, and then how they started selling in vintage. So I am going to switch the view here, and did that help? Yep, there we go. So we'll just go down the line because I see Laura's right here. So we'll start with Laura because you're right there.
Hi, I'm Laura, aka Shop Von V or Laura Von V. I sell vintage and modern. I feel like I'm just doing my YouTube intro video. I sell vintage and modern on eBay, Poshmark, and Etsy. And I guess my origin story for how I got started with vintage, I was just bored working retail and I wanted to get out of it. So this was my way out.
Awesome. And do you have a background in vintage? I mean, is it something you used to purchase and wear?
Yeah, no, I definitely always had a funky dress style. So I feel like it was just natural. And I just always thrifted and, just kind of eased into it.
Exactly. And the other thing too, I think that all of us have YouTube channels. So I know we're all on kind of different platforms, but I think we're all YouTube ladies as well. Yes, we are. Awesome. Cool. So then we'll just head over. We'll tag Christina. You're next. Okay. Oh, I have to get this mirror down. Christina.
Wait. I'm Christina, also known as formerly Little Black Hanger, and now Christina Sherilyn. I sell on Poshmark and Depop, and I got into vintage because it's what sparks my creativity. I liked selling brand name stuff, but it wasn't interesting to me. So I wanted to do something with more passion to it. So that's why I started selling vintage.
Awesome. Okay, so now we'll go down here. That's an easy one.
Hello, my name is Morgan. I'm from Dirty Corners on Poshmark, and I got into vintage 3 years ago. Well, I've always been into vintage, but I started selling vintage 3 years ago when I sort of had a giant panic attack and I could not work in the regular world. So I was like, well, I'm going to go thrifting. And then I went thrifting. I was like, I'm going to do this forever. And I actually decided to just continue to sell clothes. So it was like a mental breakdown, but it turned out to be a really good one. So yeah. So I used to be a hairdresser, so I did not like that world. So too much drama. The reselling world has definitely welcomed me, and I feel so welcome in this community. So that's another big reason why I decided to stay. So yeah.
Awesome. We're so glad you're here too. All right, and then everyone knows Brittany shows up a lot in on my channel. Take it away, Britt.
Yeah, so I'm Brittany or Shop Foxborough. I used to go by Foxborough Vintage, but I changed it over a year ago. I think after Posh Fest, I consolidated everything. And so Foxborough Vintage is for some reason taken on Poshmark, so I decided to go with Shop Foxborough, and that is who I am. And I do sell on Etsy and Poshmark, and I sell like household stuff on eBay, but not really like a lot with the clothing. And I've done a bunch of other small apps too, but Etsy and Poshmark are my two main platforms that I really focus on. And yeah, I don't know. I started selling vintage after I kind of got into wearing it myself and going to the thrift store. And I would just find all this stuff that I really couldn't leave behind, because if you've ever really been in love with vintage, it's just like some of it is so well made, it's beautiful, it's so unique, and it's just like, how can I leave this behind? But it wasn't necessarily my size or my style, so I just started listing it, and I kind of modeled myself, or like what I wanted my shop to be, after people that I admired in the vintage community at the time. But then I sort of grew into sort of my own personality and my own way of selling, and that is where I'm at now.
Awesome. And I think I think with a lot, well, with all of us on here, we all are similar but different. And that's the best part, is that all of us sell vintage. All of us on this panel model our items, but everything is a little bit of a different, perspective. It's what makes us feel good. It's what represents us. And I think that is super amazing. So everyone knows about me, so I'm just really going to be facilitating the conversation here. But the thing that you touched on, Brittany, my next question was going to be, what platforms do you sell on? But then specifically, where do you find the most success with vintage? So I think that's kind of where I want to take this, because you can sell on multiple platforms, but it's just where does your success from vintage selling come from?
Do you want me to start? You want to go backwards the other way?
Sure.
Reverse.
It's like, just like lay down the cards. All right. So when I first started on Poshmark, I didn't really feel like the vintage community was on Poshmark. And whenever I would list vintage pieces, I would get like really low offers for them that were frankly insulting. But as the community has kind of developed, there's been a lot more appreciation, a lot more vintage buyers coming on to Poshmark looking for vintage pieces. And even though I still usually get the best prices for vintage on Etsy, I find that things move pretty quickly on Poshmark, and I would say that vintage is actually a better seller for me on Poshmark than it is on Etsy. So
that's awesome. Well, and it's interesting because after PoshFest last year, I heard a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to start to focus on vintage. It was an interesting thing where I don't know if people just got inspired or, there was a lot of talk about vintage doing well, but so many people after the beginning of the year really were like, oh, I'm vintage now. And I thought it was just interesting because I know that all of us have been, dabbling in vintage for a while. So
yeah, I think that there is something that I see with a lot of like new vintage sellers where, and I don't know how to like say this nicely, but there's good vintage and there's bad vintage, and not everything that is vintage is good. And a lot of people have like a kind of confusing or questionable taste when it comes to what they're picking up, because it doesn't translate well into the modern aesthetic. Like if you're not focusing on like 50s or 40s or 60s or things that fit into those particular aesthetics, and you're kind of looking for vintage pieces that can fit into the modern wardrobe, then you have to pick the right things, because not everything works. And people struggle with that.
Exactly. All right. So Morgan, tell us, where do you sell and where do you find the most success with your vintage pieces?
Well, I definitely find the most success on Poshmark, and I think that's because I sell my items very low price. So, like, I pretty much give my items away, honestly. And I can be truthful, but I get my items at a very reasonable price, and I feel comfortable giving them away at that. So when you're giving it away, it's obviously going to sell really fast, pretty much.
That's true.
Yeah. I definitely have the most success on Poshmark. I've tried a few different platforms, and I tend to get like sort of bored, and I kind of want to focus all on one platform at a time. I've tried so hard to have more than one, but I just get so distracted, and I just can't, just can't do it. But yeah, I would say a Poshmark is definitely where I see a lot of my vintage sales.
Yeah.
And I get pretty much everything. I do even get items that aren't really considered by vintage sellers vintage, that are like Y2K things and 90s, but I get it all at a very reasonable price, and I just, get it out the door as soon as possible. So yeah. So
Well,
Poshmark.
yeah, and that's the thing is, I think we all probably have different business models, because I started the same way, Morgan, and Brittany was the one that kind of held me to a higher standard, where I was selling, great pieces for just giving them away, essentially. And it took you too, Christina. Did you have a similar?
Oh, yeah. I think a lot of people do in the beginning, because you want sales, you want more sales, and you're getting more sales because you're, pricing lower. So yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah. I really need to get my act together.
Exactly. Well, the thing, Morgan, is to help, use resources. So it gives you a little bit more confidence. So when I was able to say, hey, Brittany, I have this dress. What do you think? So I sold, my biggest vintage sale was the Gunny Sacks dress that I had for over 10 years. It was so beautiful. And I was like, am I going to ask $75? And everyone was like, you cannot ask that. I know, Brittany, you almost killed me because of this. And I think I ended up I sold it on Etsy, and I think I sold it for $250, which was still way above that 75 mark. And I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that if I hadn't had someone in my corner kind of cheering me on. So yeah, I think
amazing. The print.
Is it the one in the picture, the green one?
It had cherubs on it.
The one that you used for this, the promo thing?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that is a fantastic dress. Right?
And the buyer was like, she came back and said, thank you for selling me this piece of art. It was, so she knew the value. So that's the thing I always tell you, because I started the same way. Christina, similar, it sounds like. It's just, we, have to have the value, especially because you're putting in time modeling it. I mean, that's the other thing is, it may not cost very much, but you're styling it and you're putting it together. So, so Christina, which platforms and where do you find the most success?
Right now, I only sell on Poshmark and Depop. I was selling some home goods on Etsy, and it did really well on Etsy. I haven't had any luck with clothing on Etsy for some reason. And also, I'm kind of like Morgan. I get very honed in on one and put all my time and effort. So I have to remind myself that I actually have a Depop shop. And running. So Poshmark is definitely my number one, but I do surprisingly have really high price sales on Depop. Sometimes it's once every blue moon. But yeah, when it happens, it happens. It's like a $200 sale. So it's nice. Sometimes it's a little surprise.
That's awesome.
It's one of those platforms that I try, but also I all feel overextended with two platforms. So
yeah.
It's like that future,
right.
On the to-do list. Yeah, I'm like, one day I'll get there.
So many platforms. I don't know how people do it.
Exactly. Well, and Laura, you sell on different platforms too, right? So you sell on, so tell us about your platforms and where you find most success.
Yeah, so I'm on eBay, Etsy, and Poshmark. And to be honest with you, it's wherever I put the work in that I see the most success. And right now, eBay is definitely my number one. And I've flip-flopped so much over the years. Etsy's been my number one for many years. And then I dabbled in Poshmark trying to let that take over, but I just couldn't get the hang of it. It's not my jam. But eBay that's just where most of my sales come in.
That's awesome. Yeah, so for me, I mean, I'm very similar to, Morgan and Christina and Brittany. I'm very hyper-focused because of, I have major ADD. So I cannot have multiple platforms at a time. And I've tried, and I have Christina, when I used to follow you when I first started and you were on Depop and I was like, oh, I need to do Depop. And I tried it and I was like, I don't have time for this. I just don't have time for it. I am like, need to be hyper focused on one thing. And then I tried eBay, but not for vintage. And it just, again, it takes too much for me to have sales on there.
I think when you're going onto a new platform, there's like different types of platforms. Like Etsy and eBay are both what are called list it and forget it platforms. So you like put the listing in and you do the work and then that's it. You just let it sit. And then platforms like Depop and Poshmark and like Kitizen and stuff like that, those are more like interactive social platforms. And so that's really my hang up with Depop, is that I want to put my items there, but it's another social platform where you have to like put in what I'm going to call like manual labor to like get sales. So you need to like, before you like push yourself onto a new platform, it's good to know what you're getting yourself into. Like, don't bother to do all the work setting it up if it's not the right fit,
Right.
Exactly. And I mean, I even tried Mercari. I tried posting some things on there, but again, for me, I don't have that energy. And because I am, modeling a lot of the pictures, I don't want to waste them on something that I'm not passionate about, just to be honest. Right. So that kind of leads us into the other great thing we all have in common is that we do all model our vintage pieces. And I want to hear from you all kind of why you model the vintage pieces. What's the idea behind that? And then we'll get into tips and stuff later. So this is kind of more like, why did you decide to model your vintage pieces? And let's start with Christina. I'm going to try to popcorn around now and kind of mix it up a little bit.
I want to throw in, we are getting some like questions over in the chat too. So I don't know if Bill wants to like write down a couple of them so that we can like touch base with what people are asking.
Yes. So let me go. Bill just ran in here, actually. Bill just ran in here and said, questions. He just said, what is happening? Oh my gosh, I'm the worst host. I am the worst host. So I will look through the questions here. Let me see if I can gather any. See lots of hi everybody. Okay, so it's so weird doing this without Bill. That's the thing, is I did one like kind of a panel a few weeks ago, and I was like, we didn't have a lot of questions, so it was totally easier. But so we'll pause. So Christina, I'll let you kind of ruminate on that question for a moment as we go through. We have a lot of people just saying hi everyone. Got your iced tea, got your coffee.
One person asked if you can be successful selling vintage without modeling, and let me just say straight up, yes. There are tons of vintage shops that I admire that do not model their vintage at all. They are either flat lays or they are on dress forms. I know very few shops that do well with hanger photos exclusively, but if they're styled and you stream or theme and you just like take care in the presentation and your photos are really nice, yes, it's very common to just sell vintage without actually modeling it. I did find that I have a higher sell-through rate when I'm modeled.
When it's modeled, yeah, I agree. The reason I started modeling my items, and I still do some items that I don't model because it's just a t-shirt, it doesn't really need to be. And I've already changed clothes 500 times and I'm over it. But I started modeling my items to give people a sense of how the item could be worn, because I feel like a lot of people stay away from vintage because they don't necessarily know how to wear it in a modern way, or they just don't think that they can pull it off. Mm-hmm. So I like to give my customers an idea that, it doesn't have to look over the top. Some pieces are over the top, but even an over the top piece can be dressed down and styled in a way that you can just wear it to the mall or whatever.
Exactly. Well, and I think, and so I want to chime in on that one too. So this is a question that's dear to my heart because it is that styling piece. And I think that that's where, well, Christina, you and I really have melded from the beginning, because that whole, let's take things that people want to throw away or that they don't know how to wear and then turn them into something more modern or style it so that it will sell. So I think that that's why I model my clothing, just because, like I just did one. It was like a peplum 80s major shoulder pad, damask print, pink with lace. It really on the hanger did not look that great. But then you put it with like ripped jeans and make it more rock and roll. And now someone can say, okay, I can see where that would sell. So I think that for me, that's kind of the reason that I do it. And I enjoy it, to be honest. I mean, I started, before I was on Poshmark, I was doing outfit of the day photos like every day. So this is kind of a continuation of that, but I can make money. So that's awesome. That's good. So then Laura, so what about you? I don't remember what the question was. Why do you model your clothes?
Well, first, just to say about the modeling, I think it's more like a labor of love kind of thing. Like it's like you said, it's not necessary. It's just more something that like I thoroughly enjoy. So I do it just for the styling aspect, I think, just like everybody else. But yeah, when I first started, I mean, I started like right after the Nasty Gal book came out in like 2014. So it was like when I started, that was just what everybody was doing. You had all these like top stores, and I can name off like 10 of them right now that aren't even in business anymore, that, you know, they all like professionally modeled their clothes. So it was like, that just naturally became my goal. I was like, I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do. It took a really long time to figure out, but
queen of modeling is Laura.
What's that?
Yes.
I know.
We're all back.
Exactly. Like bow to Laura. Yes.
No.
Yes. But I like that you say it's a labor of love, because I've had, when people talk about the business aspect, because, it is a business, we are here to make money. Some of the comments that I had, which were definitely very warranted, it was, it's kind of a waste of time to model. And that, and I totally see, again, everyone's not going to want to do it because it is that labor of love. It is that you have to enjoy it to want to, spend hours putting clothes together. Like, I know, Brittany, you kind of do batch photo shoots similar to me, right?
Yeah, I do. I have a rack on the wall behind me, and I will be going through and I'll photograph things that can go on the dress form and still photograph well. And then I'll pass over the things that I know that I want to model, and then I'll group them up by just like different accessory groups. So like I can wear the same sandals with these 3 dresses, and I can wear the same pants with these 3 tops, and then I'll so I don't have to change quite so much. Like, people don't realize until they start modeling how exhausting it is. Like, by the end of the day, I'm like, I hurt.
Exactly. Well, and so Brittany, why did you start modeling, Brittany?
So when I first started selling vintage, I modeled because I didn't have a dress form or a way to photograph the items. Then when I officially started my business, I got a dress form, but there's just some things that look better on a person, and there's a lot of things that you can't put on a dress form, like jumpsuits and culottes and pants and just all kinds of different things that you can't put on a mannequin.
Exactly.
And so eventually I went through a period where I was doing a lot of dress form photos, and I have 3 dress forms now, size 4, a size 8, and a size 14 or 16, 18. So I'm kind of like that spot in the middle, like the 10, 12. So it's nice to kind of have that range. So I'm not trying to squeeze into things that are like far too small for me. And I'm not trying to wear things that are way too big and like cinch them. But it gives like a more accurate representation of what the item fits like. And I get people all the time who ask, what's your bust size, or how tall are you, or, what size pants do you normally wear? And I don't care, like, I'll answer those questions, but they're obviously trying to get a feel for me compared to them in the clothing. that's kind of a little bit why I do it. And also because I just really love it. I feel like stuff comes to life when it's on a body. And it's
shapes, right? Like different shapes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. And then, so Morgan, I don't know if you have anything to add about why you model your items.
Well, I really like styling. I think it's like a major hobby of mine to find a piece that just looks almost absolutely unstyleable and to just make it work. I'm like, aha, I did it. I feel like, yeah, it's definitely just a hobby of mine. And I feel like it does give the clothes like life. Like Brittany said, like I feel like there are certain things whenever you put on yourself that you see the item differently. You're like, oh, maybe it's actually not that bad, because there's some pretty ridiculous things that I drag home, and then whenever they're here, I'm like, what am I gonna do with this? And then I put it on, I'm like, oh, I know what I'm gonna do with this.
Exactly.
And it just kind of all falls together. So yeah, I think it just gives the item life. So that's
awesome.
That's the main reason.
Well, and those pieces that are crazy or different, the ones that Bill rolls his eyes at me, like, why did you get that? Those are the best pieces. When you put it together and you're like, that's right. Here it is.
Sell for the most too.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're unique. They're different.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So I want to go back and, I don't want to follow just all the questions here because Amber had a question and we're just going to, like I said, we're going to take this organic. So if you have questions and you want to ask them, feel free to just pop them in the chat. I promise I will try to pay attention. If not, Bill will come in here and yell at me. Or ladies, feel free to, if you see a question, pop in and let me know if something that we want to answer. Or obviously we're going to answer them. That sounded really bad, but just cut me off because I talk. So Amber, and welcome Amber, by the way. So love to hear more about all the work with vintage sizing because this is definitely a hot topic. We did get a few other questions that came through on Instagram about sizing because it is so unique. So her specific question, do you list the item under the vintage or modern size? And do you always include measurements? So I'm just going to let you each, because we don't all have to answer the same question, but if you want to answer, you could just say, hey, and take it.
I usually always put measurements because people are going to ask for them anyway. If the item is vintage, you're always going to get a measurement question. I know I do anyway. So I usually measure everything. I even measure shirts. Like if it's vintage, it's getting measured. So yeah, it takes up.
And I agree with that.
Yeah,
it does. But I think it's necessary, especially with vintage pieces, because everything is such a unique size and such a unique proportion that if you don't put it, you are going to have the questions.
Yeah, I agree.
I tend to list the modern size in the listing, but then I will put in the description what the tag says. And then, of course, I say see measurements below. I have all the measurements. But I don't want to put like size small if it doesn't fit like a small because or large or whatever. Because if someone's looking for a size large and then the garment is actually a size small, well, then they just wasted their time basically, or got their hopes up about something that's not going to fit them. So I like to put the modern size and then just disclose that it does say, whatever size on the tag.
Yeah. And I do the exact same thing. And the reason I want to bring this up is because I've had people that have said, oh, but they can open up a case. But my thing with that is I have never once had a case open for size for a vintage piece. Whatever. The other stuff I don't even care about anymore. But for the vintage pieces, because I do the same thing, Christina, I list it as either a small, medium, or large, or I say fits best, like small to medium, but see measurements below. And then I will list them as either a small, medium, or large in Poshmark. And then I'll put the brand as vintage. So I know that's not one of her questions, but it kind of goes to the listing piece of it is, I add the measurements, I put the brand as vintage. Again, another tip from Brittany. And then I put the modern size on there.
So for me, it's pretty much the same. I always have measurements, but on Poshmark specifically, if it is 80s or later, I usually keep to the specific size that's on the tag. If it is 1970s and earlier, they had a completely different sizing numerical system. So they went by what are called misses sizes like if you go into a fabric store and you're trying to buy a pattern and you are a size 10, you're going to need a size 14 pattern. And that is basically how vintage sizing works. So if I have a 1970s vintage dress and it is marked a size 14, I will not list it as a 14 because that would not be accurate. I would list it as what a 10 would be. So that would be a medium. And then obviously I'll have the measurements down below. And I show pictures of all the tags in the listing as well so people can see. And I feel like people who truly are used to buying vintage, they're used to that kind of sizing. So
yeah, I totally agree with that. Normally what I'll do is just put like what it best fits so they can kind of reference based on that. And that's just, I think that just comes over time of like knowing and understanding what the current measurements are and how to cross that to the older measurements. So I honestly, I don't even pay attention to what the size says on the tag anymore at this point.
Yeah, I'm totally the same because it doesn't, I mean, I listed a vintage sweater that said size 42, which I could look up size 42, but honestly, it's so old, it's probably from the 40s or 50s. It doesn't, it just needs to put the regular
bust measurement in most cases. So a 42 would be like a large, but yeah, it's like you have to know that specific thing, you know.
Well, and I think, so that brings up a really good point because I think someone mentioned it over here and I'm trying to find the question to put it on here, but it was about sizing. How do you know the conversion? Because Brittany, you're a wealth of knowledge and you knew right off the bat what a 42 was in the conversion with measurements, what it is. I don't have that knowledge and I never will because I don't have recall. My brain does not have enough room for that. So for me, I literally use myself as a guide. I use a mannequin as a guide. And then I take the measurements. And then if I need to be very specific, I will go and look for like a conversion chart online if I need to do that for like a pant or something. But yeah, so talk a little bit more about that with do you think that you need to have that knowledge in your back pocket?
I think that if you sell, I think it really depends on what you sell, honestly, and what like tier of vintage seller you want to be. If you're just a casual vintage seller, no, I don't think you need to know that information. But if you are someone who is listing a beaded sequin sweater from the 50s on Etsy for $149, then yeah, I think you need to know. So.
Well, how do you decide what measurements? So you had mentioned, so I think we all say we give measurements, right? So I think that that's something that with vintage pieces we do. With the vintage pieces, for let's just say a top, we'll talk about bottoms in a second, but for a top, obviously, we're going to give the bust. What other, so I typically have, because I have my predictive text that I just type in and it's just the standard waist, length, bust, that's it. But I know that for some of those pieces, especially if you're asking more, you certainly need to probably give like.
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole. Again, it really depends on the era. If you're selling like a really fitted, like high neck 50s dress, you're going to need the neck measurement, the back shoulder seam. You're going to need, waist, like neck to waist, and then the skirt length. And then you're going to need hips. You're going to need waist. You're going to need bust. And then I've even had people ask me for under bust measurements. If it's a long sleeve, you're going to need to know the sleeve inseam. It just really depends on the piece. Like if it's a really tight fitting piece and it has no stretch and you're asking, $200 for it, people are going to want to know pretty much every measurement you can give. But if it's just like a smocked sundress from the 1980s, bust, waist, length, that's it. That's good. So.
Well, and then what about the rest of you ladies? What kind of measurements do you include?
I just do it depends on the piece.
Okay.
If it doesn't have stretch, because some of the necklines on vintage pieces can be so tight.
Yeah,
I can barely get them on mine. So yeah, it just depends on the piece. But a lot of times, just bust, waist length, sleeve length if it's long sleeve, and that does the trick.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, that's what people want to know. Does it fit? And it's one of those where if someone comes back and asks, if they really want to know, they'll ask for like, can you tell me how long the sleeve is? Because I don't normally put that in. And then I'm thinking, well, if they're going to ask for that, they're obviously interested, because with vintage, it's usually the person is pretty interested, what I found.
Yeah, I think just being willing to provide the measurements is really key. I don't think stressing about it in the very beginning is necessary, but making sure that you keep up with the customer in that aspect. And also remembering that like a lot of vintage people are willing to alter it. You know, they're willing to make it fit their body. So, you know, it's not like an anthropology piece that is like
a dime a dozen. And
yeah, like these are things that people understand the rarity.
Yeah.
Exactly. Millie and Monica, team measurements on everything. Yep.
Hi, Monica.
100%. Let's see. Another question. So Lisette said, do you always put vintage in the brand? So I kind of touched on this a second ago that I do. But let me ask the rest of you. So, and I guess when we're talking about this, I do want to clarify, I'm really focusing more on Poshmark just because I feel like that's where most of us post some. I mean, obviously there's outliers, but, and then Laura, you can kind of give us some insight on how you do that on eBay or anywhere else. So what else do we do?
Someone else talk.
I always put vintage, yes, unless it is something like Yves Saint Laurent or Gucci, then I'll put it under that. But unless it's some notable brand, because a lot of, vintage brands are not, recognizable to the average person. So I just put vintage.
Yep.
Yeah, I always put vintage too. Just because I feel like that's like what I am for the most part. And if somebody sees my stuff in that category, I feel like they're going to go to my store and see the whole deal. So they're going to be like, oh, she has this, and they might see something else they like, So even if something doesn't necessarily qualify as vintage, sometimes I will put it in that category just so the rest of my shop will get recognized. And that's considered probably not good, but like I feel like it's good for me. So yeah. So I always use vintage.
Yeah, I'm the same. Vintage or, like you said, Christina, if it's like Gucci or something like that, like I'm going to label it Gucci. But other than that, it all goes under vintage. The only thing I'd be interested in, because on eBay and Etsy, it's like a known fact that you can do vintage or just VTG. But I don't know what the SEO is for Poshmark, if you can shorten it to VTG and it still counts.
I don't think it's that. I mean, the SEO on Posh is so bad.
Yeah.
Something else that I saw the other day is that people are starting to list under the brand American Vintage, like for stuff that's specifically made in the USA. And I didn't know that was a thing, but also there was also like a couple of modern pieces on there that were the actual brand American Vintage. So now I'm confused. And I'm like, should I be listing some made in the USA pieces under that? Or not.
I feel like that happens a lot on Depop. Like I've noticed that with that brand, like you get a complete mixture of the actual brand and then vintage. It's confusing.
So I'm just gonna stick to vintage. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's when I'm typing it in, when it does the pre-fill, whenever I'm typing vintage, it always wants to give me something else. Like, I don't even know what the other ones are, but it always wants to try to put it in there. So maybe that's what happened with the American Vintage, and people just
Vineyard Vines is always the one that accidentally labels for me.
A little Vineyard.
This is why I won't list on my phone. Like, I will not list on my phone. It's just like, you type the right thing, and it puts in some complete nonsense, and you look like a fool, and I won't do it.
So let me make sure we answered, because there was a lot of questions around the size. So Seek Joy asked, and I think we answered this, how to convert to modern size. We kind of touched on it. It really is just use your measurements, use online resources, and disclose. I think that's number one.
Brittany, you should do a video on the subject.
I think she has one. Brittany, don't you have one?
On sizing, no. I have pricing, yeah. But
next week we're all tuning in for it.
Exactly. And that's a good plug. Everyone, just so you know, everyone's information is down below. So all the ladies, all the platforms, everything is linked. You can just click the link and head on over and check everyone out that is on the panel. Again, I love each and every single one of them. So let's see here. Okay, so here's a great one. This has to do with bottom. So we were talking a little bit about top. So this is a really kind of different look at that from a pants perspective. So what do you do if an item is a size 3? Vintage Wrangler does odd sizes a lot. And I think in vintage there, we see a lot of those odd sizes that historically were junior sizes, but before that they were the odd sizes. So
20 are always meant for the juniors market though.
Okay.
So, and usually with juniors, it's like, you just drop one size. So a 3 is a 2. A 5 is a 4.
Okay. So how would you, well, for this question, so if she had a vintage pair of Wranglers that say size 3, so that is, obviously that is juniors, would you do the waist of 26? Or would you put a number size?
I would probably put the number size because that's going to be the fit that, as long as the measurements matched up to what a size 2 would be, then I would put a size 2. If it were pants, I would just do extra small. So, does that make sense?
I don't like pants. It does. And my thing is I don't like pants for that exact reason, because for me, I'm a size 2. But I wear a 26 or a 27 inch depending on the cut of the jean. And so if you have a vintage jean, I have no idea. So for me, I don't even like to sell them just because of this conundrum.
So the number that.
So pants are hard for me.
When it's okay, so if you have a size 26 jean, 26 is supposed to be the waist size. But it's only the waist.
And I don't know if anyone else is still here. Everyone is spinning, so you may be able to hear.
Oh no!
What's that?
Found an internet problem.
Oh well, I'll just keep talking.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So it's like 26-inch waist on a person, and then that doesn't necessarily line up to the waist on the jeans. So I think most people, do you know, it's like a 13-inch rise, right? From your natural waist to the crotch. So
yeah, 13 or 12.
Yeah, so that's like the rib cage rise. So if you had a 26-inch waist with a 13-inch rise, then that would be like a true 26, if that makes sense.
That's why I don't like selling pants either.
Yeah. It's hard. Pants are hard.
They are hard. Like shopping for myself.
What's that?
I would probably just put like the item as extra small and then go into detail in the description just to because I don't want to say something wrong. I mean, like
pants. I mean, jeans on Posh though. Like you can't do extra small, medium, large. Like you have to pick a size. And I'm like,
yeah. I always just do whatever the waist size is.
Yeah,
but maybe that's why I don't sell very many pants.
Hello.
She's back.
I have no idea. It literally it shows that I'm logged in twice and StreamYard disappeared. I have no idea.
Well, I talked about pants for too long, so bring up another topic, please.
Perfect. Great. I'm sure it was wonderful. So let's, because I think I answered, if I did not find your question, if I didn't answer it, make sure to pop it back in the questions or let me know. Bill can come let me know. But let's talk a little bit about the modeling process, because that's one of another question I get all the time is, what does your modeling process look like? And I think, Brittany, you actually touched on this a little bit ago about what your process looks like. I have a video on it, so not to give a little plug, but I do have a YouTube video on.
Laura has one too.
You do? Yes. Awesome. Cool.
Yeah. And Christina, you have one too. You did one with tops one day. It was really good.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we have one too. I think we all have one.
Laura, how about you?
Oh, wait, do I have a video? Yeah. Yeah, I have a couple of them.
Yeah.
So there we go. So for more information, you can head to all of our channels and look at how
I
to
don't
do
have
this.
one because I don't. I only have my phone to record videos on, and I also use my phone to take pictures. So that is I can't navigate that. So that's yep.
Gotcha. So then what is everyone's process? So I know obviously you have videos that everyone can go check out in depth, but kind of like the quick notes on how you do your photographing for your pictures.
Who wants to go first?
Should I start?
Yes, Laura, start.
It's not very quick, so I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have a DSLR that I use to take my photos. I have like a lighting kit that I use and a seamless white backdrop. So, yeah, take the photos. I put them on my computer. I do a lot of editing, which is super time consuming and not something I necessarily recommend because you're probably skipping a lot of money in between that you could be making, but I like using Photoshop and I like using Lightroom. So yeah,
Love, like you said.
what?
Labor of love, like you said.
Well, and that's good because those are some of the tools. So that was kind of the next question I was going into, so we can kind of wrap it together. Or what are some of the tools that you use? So you use Photoshop and Lightroom, both of those?
Yeah, Lightroom if I want like a little bit more artistic look. Photoshop, I have these presets already like ready to go, so it's just like one touch. That they're called adjustments in Photoshop, and in Lightroom they're called presets. But yeah.
Okay, awesome. And do you take do you kind of pick out your items and do everything in batch, or do you do it like throughout the week?
Yeah, I set it all up on a clothing rack and kind of just like mentally try and pick out like I'll take out modern clothes to try and match with the clothes that I'm going to be modeling, and kind of just create like an outfit with each item.
Awesome. And what about Christina, Morgan, your process?
Mine is very chaotic. I just use my phone. I use Photo Timer, which is a free app that you can use, and it lets you take, I think, up to 50 pictures at a time, but I usually just do like 10 or 15. I do all mine in like square mode, so I don't have a lot of like full body shots, just because of you have to have the camera far enough away, and I just don't have the room for that. So I do like cropped styling photos. To edit, I always edit my cover photos, and I use Visco. I just have a preset on there that I click, just like Laura does. And I need to start doing what Brittany and Laura both do, and like have everything organized and piece items together to go together. Because mine is just my room.
It's still chaotic. Don't worry.
It's so chaotic.
It still saves time, though. It saves so much time.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, I need to do that.
Well, and then one other question, Christina, kind of where do you take your pictures inside? Do you use a backdrop? So Laura uses a backdrop. I think, Brittany, you have a room or a wall that you use.
Yeah, I have a studio.
Okay.
Yeah. I just use this wall, and then these two windows beside me offer enough natural lighting during the day. So sometimes if it's gotten too late in the day, I'll use the light kit, but I try not to.
Okay. And so something that's totally different, Morgan, you take most of your pictures out in like nature on the cool farm, I guess, that you're on. It is so cool, your area. Tell us about your process.
I take all my pictures in my yard for the most part. So when I don't take pictures, or if I'm behind, it's just because it rained that day or something, honestly. I style everything, and oh no.
Well, we'll come back. So she does things outside, and I find that for me, I have a studio set up that we do the pictures. My process is so pulled back though. I use my iPhone and I set the timer, and I literally just stand there and take the picture, and then I don't really
need to get remote.
You don't need a remote though.
You do. It make your life so much easier.
I mean, I have them though. It's funny. I actually have remotes. Like I just don't have. I just have never used them. I probably should.
I fought the remote thing for a long time too.
Yeah.
What do you do with it? Like
changed my life.
What do you do with it when you take the picture? Just hold it.
I just like hide it in my hand.
But I'm very specific with my hands. Like if you've ever seen my hands, they're very like, I don't know, very specific. But then I don't even. So editing for me, I don't really edit.
Oh yeah, I do.
So I do a little brightening.
Yeah.
I only do my cover photos just because I'm very like, I just want everything to look the same and cohesive.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason.
Awesome.
I edit. I just use like Pixapgo, pretty easy, and I usually find that I can't use lights on preset when it's a modeled photo because it washes out skin really badly. So I'll usually have to like up the warmth and the color to kind of get like that skin tone back. And then I use my front facing camera, but the quality's not as good as the rear facing camera. But usually if I use the rear facing camera, all of my photos come out and I look like a goober. And so I just gave in and started using the front face camera. So.
I do the same thing because anytime I try to use my rear facing camera, all of them are awkward. And
yeah. I'll take like 30 photos and one of them I'm like, that one's all right.
That's why you do a burst. Just do the burst because then it doesn't matter. It's like one of them's gonna look decent. Maybe. So Seek Joy has a question. So this is kind of more about sales, a little bit off topic, but I didn't want to miss another question, so I have it pulled here. So let's come back to that question, but it's kind of like parking lotted, so we can think about that in a minute. So I guess we already talked about the tools. So the tools, are there any other tools that you used for taking your pictures or editing your pictures that you would recommend?
So my husband got me a ring light 2 years ago for Christmas, but I actually don't like the light that it projects. I think it really gives like weird shadows. So I actually keep it off to the side. And then I have an umbrella light. And then I also mix natural light because I have a big picture window. So I think that a lot of people say, don't mix the two lights, but you just have to find whatever works in your space and just use whatever lighting that you can. I think my umbrella lights, I bought like almost 10 years ago off of Amazon for $35 or something. So it doesn't take a lot of money, but you do want to make sure that you have good lighting because if you don't have good lighting, your pictures aren't going to be clear and it will definitely be harder to get the money that you're trying to get for the pieces.
Yeah. And I like that advice. Is like, it is all about the lighting. So if you can get natural lighting that looks great, like Christina does, that's fantastic. But when you can't really control the lighting, it makes it a little bit more.
If I could choose between the two, natural lighting or studio lighting, I would choose natural lighting any day. It's just so much easier to work with. And it's so much more like complementary to anyone.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I live in a cave, so.
Well, and for me, it's hard to, like, since everything's set up here, I would love to go outside and take all my pictures outside here, but it just, then I would have to bring, like, a stand and I guess a remote or something. I don't know. I'd have to change my process, and I'm not ready to change.
Yeah,
ready to change.
Or cold.
Okay, so let's, okay, so there was a question earlier. So Seek Joy, I'm not going to forget this question, I promise, but kind of going back, in fact, let's just answer it. We'll just go with this and then we'll come back to some of the questions people had on Instagram. So have you seen an impact in your vintage sales with the current situation?
Sales in general.
Hi, I'm back.
Hi, Morgan.
I'm so sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. Life happens.
Well, the battery died, and yeah, it was awful. So I'm back.
Excellent. Well, we kind of switch gears where we just are starting the topic. Have we seen our sales impacted by the current situation? So that's where we are going at this point. So what do we think?
My sales have definitely been impacted. Not so much last week, but definitely this week. I know it's only Tuesday, but I feel like it's going to be different. And I think it's probably because of my productivity. I feel like I haven't been as active as I normally am. So I feel like it's honestly because of me. I don't really feel like it's because of the situation. It's because I kind of feel bad about what I'm doing, even though I know I'm doing it for me. You know what I mean? So honestly, it's probably my fault. But yeah.
Yeah. And so to add to that, last week I had one sale, that is a shocker. I have never, since I've been on Poshmark, April of 2018, have never had a week that I didn't have at least a handful of sales. So I had one sale, but I'm exactly like you, Morgan. I didn't put the work in. I didn't list anything. I didn't really do anything. And then yesterday I sent out offers and all this stuff, and it woke up. So I think for me, I'm getting burnt out a little bit, not with vintage or anything, but with just life in general, to be honest. And so it's hard to say, yeah, I'm gonna go list a bunch of things when there's other things happening.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And my sales have definitely been struggling. And I think Brittany, you and I kind of went back and forth on my YouTube comments a little while ago about just, it's hard right now. Like we're selling non-essential stuff. This stuff is not like, it's so not important right now. And so it's hard to, like, I don't want to market myself. I don't want to like try and ask someone to buy something that's just so not necessary. So I think it's just, doing what we have to do and not being hard on ourselves for, things that we can't control.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I have a comment from Megan. She says, I look up to all of you as a new vintage seller. And her number one question would be, do you structure your days? How do you know the work is done? And I think in a time right now where I think all of us are working from home either way, it's kind of like, how do you structure it so that you aren't just constantly, obviously last week was a bad example for me because I really just didn't do the work. I don't want to do the work today. Anyway, that was a TikTok reference. If you get it, great. But anyway, so yeah, let's answer Megan's question. So
I've had to be a very, very, I don't know. You just have to be hard on yourself sometimes. At the end of the night, you have to be like, okay, have a little pep talk with yourself in the mirror. Do not work. Stop working. Turn off your phone. Take a bath. I don't know. Do something for yourself. I always say take care of your mental health because, if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to put your best foot forward tomorrow. So turn it off. I know it's hard. Put your laptops down.
Exactly. Well, and the question that I didn't even have everyone say in the beginning is if you're full-time or part-time in reselling.
Full-time.
Full-time.
I'm full-time.
Full-time.
Part-time. I'm the only part-timer.
Like outside of all of what is happening right now, I tend to set goals for myself for the week rather than the day. And that kind of helps me have the flexibility that I need if I have a day where other stuff needs to get done. So I might look at my active listings and see I have like 710 and I want to get to 750 by the end of the week. And I can expect to sell, however many in a week. And so I add that on to the 40 that obviously need to be listed. And then I'll sort of say, okay, so this week I need to try and do 50 listings. And that might mean 2 days worth of batch photographing, measuring, and inventorying. And then like 5 days spread out of listings or 3 days of listings. And then also drafting so that I can list every day. So that way you give yourself this sort of flexibility and you're not pushing yourself too far beyond, what you're really capable of in the week. And I I think that it's really important to have realistic goals, because if you just push and drive yourself all the time, then you will get burnt out really fast.
Exactly. I think that's great advice. And going back to the self-care piece, because you may not even realize that you're starting to get stressed out or that you're feeling the impacts until all of a sudden you're sitting down and you're just like, oh, and like Brittany, I know for you, you can't even relax. You have people that you're taking care of. So that's a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, so some days I get to the end of the day and I've listed, 6 things in the day. And normally I like to try and do 10, but, it's either keep going and get no downtime, or stop and get, an hour to myself. So like at some point you have to draw the line. And if you don't draw the line, that's where you see all these resellers who, they're like super productive for like a month and a half, and then all of a sudden they disappear for like a month, and then they come back and they're just like, yeah, I wasn't feeling it anymore. And that's like the risk that you take. So
yeah. Yes.
Burnout is real.
Yeah.
Celebrate the little things that you did and stop beating yourself up for the things that you didn't do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And don't compare yourself to others. I think that's the other thing too. Don't compare, because you don't know what other people are doing, and you can fall down that hole if you're, watching social media and you're seeing, oh, people are doing this amount of work or this amount of sales. It's just, you do you. As Christina, you do you, boo-boo. So we did have a few questions come through from Instagram. So I wanted to make sure we touch on those, because the one I think is a really great, I think someone has a video in this group from this, but who do you consult about vintage for pricing? So we talked about sizing. Pricing is a hot topic when it comes to vintage. And we kind of talked about how some of us price a little low. And so not to get too into the weeds with this, because I know this is like a whole hour in itself, but do you have like resources that you use, or how do you figure out pricing? And that came from Alariz Joe 4.
I have a whole video that I just did on pricing vintage and 3 different methods. So you can go check that out on my channel if you want.
Excellent.
I think, Christina, you have a bunch of like different guides on your channel too, don't you?
Yeah, I have a few videos. I dabbled.
Just a couple.
I'm running out of ideas with this quarantine. But I look at all of your closets. People that I look up to, I'm like, okay, what would they price?
I'm the same way.
What would Laura do?
Exactly. I'm like, what would Brittany? Would she tell me that I'm pricing it too low?
Yeah.
Well, now I think we're all going to be consulting Brittany and being like, well, are you going to get, is this okay?
Yeah, are we in trouble? What do you think?
New vintage godmother.
Okay, so check out Brittany, Christina, check out their videos. Also, lots of resources available to help with that. There's lots of different tools that you can use. So using others to compare, and then also just knowing what your items are worth. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is using like the Vintage Fashion Guild and looking up a brand if you're not familiar with it. Because there have been times where I was so surprised to find a brand on the list and find out that, oh, if it's on the list, it's probably going to be worth a little more than just the $15 I was going to sell it for.
Yeah, definitely do your research. Research.
Yes. Well, and along with that too, do your research, use your resources, but make sure you're doing the work. One thing that tends to happen is people, and so, we joke about, oh, we're going to use Brittany for everything, but you also want to make sure you're self-sufficient, because I still have people that reach out to me with questions that they, I don't mind answering, but when it starts to get, when you rely on someone else and they're not available, it can be a challenge to your business. So just make sure you use your resources. As a manager, that's what I would always tell my employees. I will help you find them. I will lead you to the water.
Right. Well, we all have channels where I feel like we've all made those types of videos where we're leading you.
Like,
leading you to the water.
Exactly. So then one more question, there's a couple more, but I think this one kind of goes back to the photography modeling piece, but do you think props help sell vintage? And that came from Myers Mall. So yeah, what do you think?
Props? Like,
yeah, what are we talking about?
I'm gonna take that maybe like accessories is what I'm gonna take that as.
I feel like they do, because I kind of see my yard. I know I didn't get a chance to say it earlier because of my phone, but I see my yard as like a big prop, and I feel like people get fascinated by where I'm taking my photos, and they're like, oh, that's a cool barbed wire fence, or that's a cool cow, and they're like, oh, look at your outfit, that, you know, and it sort of like gets the conversation going, and then they end up buying the piece. So I feel like if you talk to them for long enough and get to know them, then I feel like they're going to eventually be like, yeah, you know, I am going to buy that. Yeah. So I definitely think that props work.
Yeah. I have a whole, so my personal closet is actually broken up into modeling accessories and regular, like everyday. It's kind of like my stylist closet. Yeah. And a lot of them are the big statement earrings that I could not wear in public, because if I did, they would kill me. All my purses, my big old platform, like 70s huge platforms that I could never wear. So I count those as accessories that help accentuate something. So I think that it can help, but again, not necessary for everything. Sometimes I'm just trying to put a look together just so I, can have the look there.
I tend to, go ahead.
Also, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I tend to keep any sort of like accessories or counterparts to what I'm wearing rather neutral. Because in the past, when I've done like really statement accent pieces, then I get people who are trying to buy those pieces out of my cover shot. So I have sort of, like you said, Tori, like a styling wardrobe, but I have 3 pair of the exact same Swedish has-beens in 3 different colors. And I use, just a plain straw hat. And a lot of times I'll try to use things that I actually have for sale in my Poshmark closet. And I try not to accessorize too much, just because, again, I find that people want to buy the accessories, and it kind of takes away from the actual item. So I think it's a mixed bag.
I agree. I try not to use too many accessories. I mean, like a belt here and there, some earrings, but I also don't want to take away from the piece that I'm trying to, obviously put on the spotlight, because that is what's being sold. But I tend to get people, if I put too much, too many accessories on, people start to ask, oh, well, are you selling that purse? Or,
Yeah.
That's true. Or is the belt included? That one I've had, is the belt included? I'm like, no. So yeah, you see that.
So I actually have a tip for that. If you shop at the Goodwill bins, I just like pick up almost any sort of like fashionable belt that I can find, because it's not very expensive. And then if I have a piece that needs a belt, I'll actually like include the belt, even though it's not original. And people seem to really like that. And it does help sell the stuff. Because if I say it comes with the belt, then they like that.
That's a great tip. I love it, because I always leave them. So I'm like, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah, those like braided leather belts, that aren't like worth a whole lot to resell, but people love them.
Yeah,
I do those a lot. And like miscellaneous old like belts that came off of 80s dresses that Goodwill tried to sell for $3, stuff like that.
The gaudy goodness.
Yeah. That's awesome. No, that's a really good tip. I love it. And there are more tips like that over on Brittany's channel at Shop Foxborough. Link down below. So I know we did go over a little bit. We kind of thought we would, but I want to give everyone in the chat, if you have any other questions that you have that we haven't addressed, this is the time. We will certainly make a little bit more time to discuss them. In the meantime, ladies, think about what is a piece of advice that you would give your fellow vintage resellers. So something, obviously, Brittany, you just shared a great piece of advice, but if you have more, that's great too. But any last inspiring words or advice?
I feel like you don't need to think about it too hard, just have fun with it, and whatever you create out of it, it's going to work, because it's creative, and it's you, and it's, it's fun. So just not to overthink it, just to have fun with it,
Love it. Love it.
Mine would be to put your own personal flair on things because it makes you stand out. It makes you unique. Kind of like you said, just have fun with it. Be you. No one else can be you. So run with that. And it really shows with the vintage items that you pick up. And it's just fun.
Laura, what about you?
Yeah, I think I have to agree with those. Like just being yourself and letting that, you know, be the picture of your business, I think is important. Also, I have a whole video on how not to be a perfectionist because it's like the worst part of my business is how much of a perfectionist I am. And it's bad.
I hear you. Exactly. Exactly. Or so for me, like the imposter syndrome that I think that, and that goes back to pricing things too little because I'm like, well, what do I know? Who am I? I do have a video on that as well, imposter syndrome. So I think those are all things that creatively, Phil just brought me a present. I had to look to see what's happening here. He just brought me this.
My phone did something.
Your phone did something. Okay. Oh, your phone is dying.
Here, I have one, but let me get something to show you. Hold on.
Okay, well, while we're doing that, I saw Michelle had a question. I wanted to, we could talk about this. What are each of your best vintage flips or your fave? I've already talked about mine, that Gunny Sacks dress.
Go ahead, Laura.
I sold an Izzy Miyake duster jacket for, I want to say like $300 to $400. I've had like 4 or 5 sales that were in the $300 to $400 price bracket that are like all it's like a cluster of favorites. But that's also happened over the span of like 7 years. So
mine was probably not necessarily my highest price sale, but my favorite was a Liz Claiborne boiler suit, bright orange from the 80s, and I sold it for $100 on Depop, and the girl was absolutely in love with it. It was just one of those like feel good sales where you like, you know, it's going to a good home and she's gonna rock it.
Yeah,
and it's so exciting. So
Yay.
yeah,
I love those vintage Liz Claiborne boiler suits. I have a denim one right now, and I am not budging on the price because I know someone's gonna get it.
and I might do it.
That's confident. So Brittany, what were you going to show us?
So my little advice to, you know, resellers, especially if you're just starting out, is to not be afraid to pick up pieces with damages. And I was just going to show you guys this piece. I'm in a Facebook group of vintage sellers who it's called like Wounded Birds, and they sell vintage pieces that are damaged but still wearable or restorable. And I just wanted to show you guys like the absolute amazingness of this. Is an Edwardian blouse, so this is all like hand stitched on here, but you know, I picked it up for I think $15 because it's got some tears back here, if you can kind of see it. But it's just like, just because a piece has some damage, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have value. And so
100%.
With vintage, you just have to look beyond, like, it's not like modern stuff where, you know, you find an Anthropologie piece and it's got a hole and you're like, all right, well, 50 other people have this dress without a hole, so I'm not going to buy this. These are like one of a kind pieces. And if it's special enough, then someone will take the time to fix it, or you can take the time to fix it. And so I think just don't be afraid to sell things with flaws. I've sold hundreds of items with flaws, disclosed, repaired, whatever. But it's just, it still has value. Absolutely.
Love
this
it.
top I actually got on Poshmark for like $5 because it had a huge stain at the bottom. And I can't get the stain out either, but I just tucked it in. So like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just tuck it in. It's
It works. It works.
no, yeah.
And my favorite sales, probably, so when I first started selling vintage, I had this like 1950s, like skin tight, teal lace, like cheongsam dress, that I wore to a Christmas party. And like I basically couldn't breathe. But eventually I listed it on Etsy, and then I sold it for $200, which was pretty awesome. I paid $20, so that was sweet. And then more recently, I was at the Goodwill bins, and there was this coat that had been thrown back, and it was kind of ugly and kind of amazing. It was sort of like a maxi midi length plaid coat in like orange, green, and black with velvet collar. And at the time, I thought it was maybe 70s, but I brought it home, and there's actually, again, a Facebook group of people who can help you identify the different eras that an item might be if you are stumped. And it turns out it was from the 40s. So I listed it and sold it for almost $400. That was pretty awesome.
I bet it was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was. Once you she sent me a picture on Instagram, and it was amazing. Yeah.
I love when customers send photos.
Yeah.
Well, and I find that on Etsy, like that's the thing with Etsy is that will happen.
I kind of wish Poshmark had that.
I know. I think with the what's it coming up, the Posh, I don't know. They talked about it at
Stories.
Posh Fest. Yeah, Posh Stories. I did a whole video on this. You'd think I'd remember. Yeah, I think that you're going to be able to like tag people that you buy stuff from. So I think that's pretty cool.
Has it been like a year since they announced that?
Yeah. And some people have it. Some people have it. So I think it.
Oh.
Yes. And I've been so jealous because I keep checking and I keep not upgrading, but keep trying to make sure I have the most recent. But I think Lisette might have it, but someone has it. And yes.
Want it?
I'm like, I want it. I want it. So let's answer one more question because I know we are at 6:20, but I know Emery has asked a couple of questions. And so we will answer one last question because if not, I think that we would just keep going all night. Millie and Monica. So Monica says she had the option, but then Posh then disappeared. So they must have rolled it out to people and pulled it back. That would make sense.
Yeah. I want it.
I do too. I want it, especially for us because we model. Like I feel like that would be so beneficial to us.
Yeah.
So Emery says,
"Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry about that. My internet is not being well to me, so I just wanted to apologize."
No, that's okay. No worries. It's just like right now, everyone should have a bingo card out whenever they're on like a live event. And every time something happens where someone spins, someone drops their phone.
And the phone died again.
It's just what
I
happens.
have moths like flying around. So if I'm looking around like a crazy person.
Like, what's happening? So about pricing, is it better to price an item a little higher so you can get offers and still make good profit? Or is it better to price it a little lower so we can get more attention? I mean, with Posh, it's a little different because you have to plan for that 20%, and I don't send a lot of offers on my vintage pieces. So some of the vintage pieces on Posh, I'm kind of like, this is what I want to get unless I get really desperate.
Same.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, I try and price usually I try to have a price that I want, and then I add on 30%. And that 30% is sort of my like negotiation room, and hopefully they buy it at the higher price. But if they don't, then as long as it sells above that 30%, I'm happy. And if it starts to like cut beyond that, then I am reconsidering like maybe not buying that style again in the future. And in general, I think if you're pricing vintage and you've done your research, then if your price shouldn't make someone angry just because you're trying to like price higher to take offers, but it's better to start a little bit higher because I wouldn't say that it generates more interest to have it a lower price.
No, but it does make sure that you get the price that you're looking for if you give a little wiggle room, I think.
Yeah.
I think. Okay, so it is 6:21 here in the Pacific. The Pacific Northwest. So ladies, I am so excited that you joined me this evening. This was so much fun. It was so great getting to know you all a little bit better. So the last thing to kind of wrap everything up, because they do this on the show Hot Ones. Have you seen the show Hot Ones? Any of you? Okay, Christina. Yes. Okay, good. Christina, Laura, and it's like camera there. Essentially, whatever you have going on. So this is your last, the last word. And just if you're working on a video or you have an upcoming project or anything that you're working on, let us know. Like I said, everyone's links are going to be down below. So make sure you go follow, check them out. They are great resources. So we are going to start here with Laura because we're right here.
So yeah, I have a YouTube channel and an Instagram that I'm trying to slowly put together, like a keywords list that people can start to use as like maybe a little bit more of a resource to understand keywords, because that's the one thing that I get the most questions about is how I do keywords. So hopefully I'll get that resource together soon. I have a lot of time on my hands, so hopefully that.
It'll happen.
Yeah.
I'll look forward to that one.
You can do it. I'm struggling.
All right.
Am I next?
Christina.
Okay. I also have a YouTube channel. Obviously working on putting out new videos. I tried to start a blog. It didn't work. So I started a Pinterest board instead. So I have a new Pinterest page with all of the information from all my videos, my educational videos. So people can just go there. The links are all in the descriptions of my videos. Other than that, I'm just trying to keep it together.
Awesome.
I have a big haul video coming up because I did a lot of online sourcing. So
Yay!
We're still looking for hauls. We're still trying to find hauls. Yes. All right, Miss Brittany.
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. I have a video coming out on Thursday. I got a mystery box from someone on Poshmark that is in my size, and I am going to be doing a styling video similar to my Stitch Fix video, but it's going to be from a Poshmark seller. So if that interests you, that will be on Thursday. And yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to hold it together over here. I am not putting too much stress on myself. I have 2 little boys. They are both home with me. Daycare is closed indefinitely. My husband is an electrician, so he goes to work every day. He's an essential worker. And, you know, I don't have a lot of time. And the time that I do have, I'm playing Animal Crossing. So I'm just trying to list 3 items a day and get you guys 1 YouTube video a week. So
That's
that
right.
is enough.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, just gotta do it.
Exactly. So the last thing, so I'm going to give just a little plug. You know, I hate to turn this on me, but I'm working with a group of women, and we are giving away money to resellers in need. So I just want to plug this here. I think that this is relevant, that we're all doing our best to survive right now. We are lucky enough to be able to, provide to others who don't have anything. So there's a nomination form. All you have to do is nominate somebody that you feel deserves it. And then that's it. We're not charging anything. We're literally just going to give them money and ask them to give half of it away. So that is it. We've only had a few people that have nominated people. You can nominate yourself. I feel like that's the other thing. And we don't care what you spend it on. This isn't about, it's not about someone who is like desperate in need. If they are, great. But if you just need something to pick your day up, like you need to buy Animal Crossing, you need money to go buy the game, excellent. We got you. So anyway, so that's it. The link is in my Instagram. Just so you can click the link. It'll take you there to the nomination form, and I'll put it below. So that's it. So ladies, thank you so much again. This was so much fun. Thank you to everybody in the chat who asked all the great questions. Like the video if you did like it. I think that this was one of my favorites. And I need to take this jacket off because I am sweating like crazy right now and drink the wine that Bill just brought me.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right.
Yeah,
thank you,
thank
ladies.
you.
Yes. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in.